I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
Lanny, when I look over there on the guest couch, Toxie, and I see Dr. Joe Bumgardner, it just makes me smile.
Oh,
No doubt about it.
Yeah, it makes me smile all over.
How long has he been hanging around here, been a part of things?
Mid-90s, probably.
1986.
Okay. He was.
That's
right.
a pretty
That's
informative
right.
year.
He bought some when we first started. That's right.
Yeah.
Dudley, what else happened in 1986?
I was 10 years old.
Dudley. Mossy Oak was formed.
Well, I know that.
Well,
That's what you were
Duh.
supposed to
That's
say.
yeah. I thought everybody.
I mean, that's just common knowledge.
That's right. 86.
Doctor-
And then when was the Lee Haven years?
Mid-90s. That's what I was
Mid-90s.
thinking about when he
Yeah.
actually joined up with us and had a club
Yeah, we
together.
had a club together.
And we skinned our knuckles and didn't do everything just right, but that was some of the funnest times
Oh, it
I've ever
was.
had.
It was.
Yes, it was.
So-
And we spent time together there, and most of them were does, but we harvested a lot of deer and learned a lot.
Yeah.
Beautiful place,
At the
cool
Skin and
camp.
Shed.
Yeah.
That's a skin
Renovated that old house.
Bodog.
It was a lot of fun.
Met some great people like Tracy Bird.
Sure
Oh,
did.
yeah. Yeah. That was some good times.
Yep.
Is that the place that Bobby says was really haunted?
Oh,
It's-
it
it
was
is a
definitely haunted.
It is a registered haunted house.
It
It
is
is
not-
in the registry of 2 different books that I
It is
know of.
haunted. I've been there.
Yeah, everybody's had some kind of
And
experience.
Some kind of
I
experience.
spent the night, Halloween night, by myself in that facility.
Oh,
But I didn't know about the ghost story at that time.
Oh, good.
did anything kind of unusual?
Nothing happened.
The most superstitious, scared to death, did not sleep all night once he heard all the stories we had in there. Who do you think it was? He was
I know.
I mean,
petrified.
obviously, cuz.
No.
What?
Worse than cuss.
You said superstitious.
This guy
not
was from
stitious,
Missouri.
But
It is Mark Drury.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Y'all
oh
kind
my
of
gosh.
manipulated him
I
a
won't
little
get
bit,
into
though.
telling the whole stories about he never went to sleep that night.
Yeah.
I mean, I got up during the night because the wall unit thing was a heater too. It was like a wall unit air conditioner that ran in the downstairs bedroom. And I got up because it was so hot I needed to turn it down. So I got up and went in the next room. Nobody was in that room, but that's where the heater thing was. And I leaned, it was on the floor kind of down low, and I leaned over and I looked down there, and squinty eyes at night, and finally turned it back down a little bit, and I started back to the bed, and I bumped into something behind me, and he's sitting there in his little whitey tighties going, you are coming back in here, right? I mean, he is right there, kindred spirits with Cuz on a lot of stuff, but especially on superstitions.
How about that?
What do you say, Bobby? He's not stitious.
Well, I'm not superstitious. I'm just a little
Little
stitious.
stitious. That's what he
I think maybe it's like,
That
it
Toxie
could
didn't
be
get that.
what we believe in, manifests itself. Who knows? Because
Oh, your mind can play with yourself
Yeah,
for sure. And that place, it was only a bow hunting only club with an old giant, well, not giant, but an old antebellum home. on it.
Big
Didn't
antebellum
Mark
home.
Drury start out here? Didn't you start him out?
he did. Well, yeah, he came, honestly, yes. He was in college. I ran into him through Cuz. I went down the first year we started and went to the World Natural Voice Turkey Calling Championship in Natchez. And I went down there with Cuz and went to watch it, and some real characters but then he was like, you got to meet this kid, and people were there, you got to meet this kid. I mean, this kid he won it last year. He probably win it again. He's won so many contests. He was 19 years old. And so he won. And then afterwards they said, hey, I want you to meet Mark Drury. And so we met and visited. I think we went to eat. I can't remember, but it was an instant connection. And he said, look, when I have spring break, I'm coming down to, I want to work in the hunting industry. That's what I want to do. And so when I take spring break, I'm going to come down, I'm going to stay with you, and he didn't ask, he was telling me, I'm going to work for free all week during my spring break because I just want to hang out and see what's going on and learn from it. And sure enough, spring break, there he was. He came, worked. We had answer the phone, kind of customer service stuff going on back then. He did some of that and did some of this, helped pack a few boxes, everything we needed.
The first intern, maybe.
For sure, the first
Yeah, no
intern.
doubt.
Plus,
Well,
he was in my price range at the time. And he came back when I got a call one day. We talked a lot, and still, we supported him in what he was doing a little bit. And the phone rang one day. He said, "Hey, just graduated. Where do I go?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I did say that." And so we had started a sales group back then. So he went to work. We didn't have anybody, and he covered the mink states.
Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas.
That's right, in the breadbasket. And that was his. We didn't even have a salesperson there. We were doing our own selling with our own clothing line. And he honestly lit the world on fire almost instantaneously.
Well, he's quite superstitious, but he makes a nice presentation. We had him as our guest speaker at the Mississippi Bowhunter Association. He made a very nice presentation.
He's amazing at everything he does, quite
a
honestly.
scientist.
He really is.
And that whole team, really.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Bumgardner, tell us just a little bit about yourself. We've got some obvious things we're going to ask you, but help us understand our listeners understand who you are. And
Okay, well, I by trade and vocation, I'm a family practitioner, general practitioner by trade, and actually I went and specialized in general surgery and did a year of chest and open heart. And it was interesting. After I got out of high school, I spent 17 years in training, and people would come to my family store in Fort Ice, Arkansas, and ask my family. My father says, "When's your son gonna make a doctor? He's been out of school for 17 years. Is he ever gonna make a doctor?" Well, I specialize in general surgery, and then I was a staff surgeon at Keesler. That's how I got introduced to Mississippi. And I like to teach, and my major professor got me an appointment at Keesler Air Force Base, and I taught there for 2 years, interns and residents, how to do surgery. One of my residents, an intern, was from the Golden Triangle area, Doug Shirley. He was from West Point area, and he says, "Doc, you ought to go up and look at the Starkville area." Said it's Mississippi State University, so they've got a fine place up there in the Southeastern Conference. Said they've got a new hospital, and nobody does chest surgery or heart surgery or pacemakers or anything that you do. You ought to go look at it. Well, I did come and look and enjoyed what I saw and had my wife see it. So after 28 years, I finally retired from general surgery from the Starkville area. And while I was here, I met an individual named Spence Bongine. Spence Bongine got me connected with Moss Yoke people. And then we spent almost a decade together hunting at Lee Haven and enjoyed that. And ever since I retired, I'm still climbing trees and enjoying quality of nature.
There you go.
Wow.
well, and just recently, you and I have something in common.
Oh, here we go.
I can't imagine. Oh, you're both breathing. That's it. Y'all are both breathing?
Just recently, you killed a monster buck. Can you tell
the
us a
velvet
little bit
season,
about
yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, I was. I had my son went to summer school at Ole Miss with the anticipation of going to Mississippi State. He met a friend up there that was from the Adams County area, from Natchez, and he said, my father. My father's from Starkville, and he loves to bow hunt, and he loves digital photography, etc. He said, "Well, why don't you have him contact me, and I'll have him come down and hunt my acreage." He had 3,000 acres that he managed, and I said, "Okay." So I went down and hunted with this individual in Adams County, and he had been had cameras out and had been filming this one deer at 5.5 years of age. He had him on camera first, but after he shed his velvet, he wouldn't come out in the daylight hours. So he finally, the landowner named him Houdini. Well, he had him on camera at 5.5. He had him on camera at age 6.5. And then I went down to hunt when he was 7.5. And the landowner told me about Houdini and where he had been appearing. And we had him coming out at night in a American joint deer vetch field. And I set up on that and went in at 2 o'clock. And deer started coming out at 4 o'clock. And that afternoon, there were several shooter bucks there in the 140 to 150 class. And
I'd say.
the landowner said, "I wish you'd hold off to see if you can get a shot at Houdini. He hasn't come out in the daylight hours in the last 7 to 10 days, but he may come out. So we'll see what the first night shows." Well, this was Friday the 13th, and
Here we go.
At 7:15, legal shooting light was up to 7:30. at 7:15, about 100 yards up the vetch field, I saw a mature deer cross, and I saw blood on the antlers, but I was not aware that was Houdini. He walked straight across the field into the woods, made a loop, and at 7:15, he came out to the vetch field at 50 yards from me. And I didn't even have to glass him. I knew that was Houdini when he stepped out. So I was shooting a Raven crossbow, and I actually had it sent back to the company a couple of weeks earlier for a recall for safety reasons. They sent it back to me. I fired it one time. It was on. It was sighted in. Everything was fine. So I was using that Raven. I had a 50-yard pin, and he stepped away from me. It was actually 52 yards, and I put my scope on him, and I started squeezing, and I held it right behind his shoulder, and I squeezed, and it wouldn't fire, and I kept squeezing, and finally, when I got up to about 8 to 10 pounds of pressure, it fired. And I was concentrating and trying to hold the pin behind the shoulder, and it sounded good. There were several other deer in the field, the vetch field at the time. They all ran off. I took a compass reading as to where he went into the woods, because when you get down, at night, and it's different. So I knew exactly where he went in the woods by compass reading, and I went to where I hit him after dark. I called the other bow hunter that was hunting with me and the landowner, and they came in. I didn't find my bolt. I couldn't find my bolt where the deer was standing. Couldn't find any blood. But I took my compass reading and started walking toward where he went in the woods, and I found my bolt broken in half, and it was clean. The arrow, the fletchings had no blood on it, and I said, surely I didn't miss. And I looked at the other end, and it had blood and some meat on it, so I knew I did have a hit. I continued to follow the compass direction, and I found blood about 20 yards from that, and we went right in the woods where my compass reading told me he went in the woods, and the blood got thin, so the landowner and the other bull hunter, we put our minds together and decided it's time to back out. I don't want to jump a deer that may not be dead yet, a quality deer like this. So we had a dog, and the next morning we went back in and got right on the blood trail where I had marked it. The dog went to it, and then we got in the woods. It was still dark. Turned our flashlight on. The dog went about 10 yards, and we flashed our flashlight out there, saw a white belly. There he was. In retrospect, it turned out it was a double lung shot, and I went through the onside shoulder, hit the other shoulder, and it broke the skin, but it didn't cause an exit wound. And as he ran, he broke it off. And we weighed him. Our scale actually max was 220 pounds. It went to 220 and wouldn't go any further, and the landowner felt like he was about a 230-pound deer. But took the jawbone out. He was indeed 7.5 years in age by dentition criteria, and I'm having him mounted by my taxidermist. Said that he would freeze it for a month to have all the 14-inch strands hanging down intact on the mount.
Man.
Wow.
Bobby's Gamekeeper green over there with jealousy.
That's a cool story.
That's a great story.
I wonder how close you were to him when that night before. If your flashlight, he must have been just out of your flashlight beam.
Actually, he was less than 40 yards from where my last blood was.
Yeah.
My last blood the night before. We went to that point. The dog picked it up, and he went straight. And the dog owner said, he's acting like he sees the deer. And we turned the flashlight on, and there was the white belly. So he didn't go 40 yards from where our last blood was. But, better safe than sorry.
Better safe.
Absolutely, that's my point. He's forgotten more in his pinky than we'll ever know collectively about bow hunting, and he knew instinctively not to go. It doesn't do you any good to push a deer that's not dead, and he could have walked in there and the deer was right there, but why take a chance ever?
So that he was halfway through shedding his velvet, or how far?
Correct. Half is intact, and the other half is hanging down. The largest strand was 14 inches hanging down.
I think I'd rather have that than a full velvet.
Honestly, it's so cool. The pictures you sent in, we saw that just the next day. It's just incredible. It's like an artist rendering of
similar
one.
to your deer.
So your deer ended up scoring like 175 inches, didn't he?
Yeah, 175 and 3/8.
I mean, that is a monster.
And
And this isn't like a whole bunch of drop ton non-typical point
No,
thing.
this is a giant.
This is just a
Straight typical.
straight 10
William,
point, right?
William McKinley told the landowner that that was the largest scoring deer in this velvet season for 2024.
Oh, well, I guess so.
Yeah, it's a giant. That's for sure.
How about that? Well,
It's
congratulations.
beautiful.
Yeah, that's something to be proud of, right
No
there.
doubt about it.
Yeah, we'll be sure. If we already put that on the,
I sent
Instagram and
it
stuff.
to Rob. I'm not sure what.
we'll make sure people can
No, we'll
see
definitely
that
use it with
and go
this.
back and look at
Actually-
it. You need to take a look at it, folks.
Actually, the current president of the Mississippi Bowhunter Association, I sent him a brief story of my harvest plus the picture, and he took the liberty and he put it on the Mississippi Bowhunter Association. Then, once it was on the Mississippi Bowhunter Association, the outdoor writer for the Clarion Ledger saw it and asked me to give him the story and the permission to put it in the Clarion Ledger for statewide distribution, and I did. And then I got another request from the Herald Sun off the coast, and then third contact I had was the Crossbow magazine wanted to put it in there. So I've had 3 or 4 national publications contact me about it because they said we've never seen a deer of this quality score-wise with velvet hanging down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey guys, listen up. Let me tell you about an awesome deal Springfield Armory is offering now through the end of 2024. When you purchase a brand new model 2020 Waypoint or Redline rifle, you'll receive a model 2020 rimfire rifle with a black synthetic stock absolutely free. That's an over $400 value on the house. You know we love Springfield Armory and their top-notch products you'd be proud to hand down to your kids and grandkids. So why wait? Learn more about this incredible offer at GearUp2024.com. Springfield Armory. Defend your legacy.
So do you think he was the bone that was exposed, it was still kind of bloody and white?
Yes.
And then
It was intact. And then they had the part that had shed, the antlers actually had a pink bloody stain to it.
Do you think it's the first deer you saw?
Oh, yes.
And definitely.
The deer that crossed the field.
Yes, sir.
That I said was a mature deer that I saw blood at that time. I didn't think that was Houdini, but in retrospect, it was.
It was. Gotcha.
I'd almost like to think that his velvet shedding may have kind of triggered him to get up and move around. You know, he didn't come out in the daylight a lot, and then all of a sudden that starts
it's
falling
got
off.
an itch or something.
Maybe it kind of aggravated him and just took his mind off of being a little more wary that night.
Well, for 3 years since he was first seen on camera at age 5.5, he was never seen in daylight hours after he shed his velvet.
Mm-hmm. You caught him at the right time.
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, all their biologist buddies have said typically, of course, that deer had a lot to shed more than most, but when they start the shedding process, it all of a sudden becomes very irritating to them, and they just got to get rid of it. It's typically not but 24 to 48 at the most, but like usually within 24 hours, they just keep on until they get it all off. So he had to have just started the process.
Well, the landowner had a camera facing down toward the vetch field, and he was at home watching the 4 deer that were in the field, and then Houdini stepped out, and he knew that I was 50 yards away, and he said, I can't stand it. He had to step out. He stepped out on the porch, and he came back a minute later, and there wasn't a deer on the field.
He knew you'd shot.
And he said, he texted me on the phone. He says, wow. And he used some superlatives. And he said, did you shoot? And I said, yes, I did. He said, more superlatives. And then he said, did you get a good hit? And I said, it sounded good. We'll just wait. So I waited till dark and got down, and you know the rest of the story.
So what's interesting
Put
to
him in
me
the truck. That's right.
with you being here, we're going to ask you some questions so it may sound like, wow, that's not really that great of a question. But really, when you think about it and come at it from your perspective, I think we're going to talk about how you kill a deer and what happens to that deer in that whole process. We want you're kind of famous for doing autopsies at the skin and shed.
Oh, look. That's
and I would just
you
like to.
You stole my thunder. That's what the cause of death that he taught us we just brought so many deer in that were bow shot because when we first got this place, it was a little overpopulated.
Yeah, I had to wear them out.
So we killed a lot of does the first year. I mean, it's a big place. So, and he was out there. If he was there, he said, "Get away! I got your deer. I'm gonna gut it for you, whatever." But he wanted to do the autopsy.
So it seems like it would be just so easy to say, "Oh, well, it got him in the lungs."
No,
but can you
no.
just kind of go into what it takes to actually kill a deer with a bow?
Let me say this: I was fortunate to have a couple of my compadres were pathologists. Dr. Ben Martin and John Parker, Columbus, Mississippi, did all of our pathology for my specimens that I submitted when I was in active surgical practice at Tibby Hall County Hospital in Starkville. And they gave me the liberty and offered me the option to take tissue. When I had a broadhead pass through the liver or through the lung or another organ, I would take that portion out. They would make slides of it for me so I could see on a microscopic level what damage a sharp broadhead did to the blood vessels. And on a sharp broadhead, when it went through the lungs, it hit a pulmonary artery or pulmonary vein. There's a protein in those vessels called elastin. It's like a rubber band. And if it's sharp, it'll cut it and it'll open up the wound to bleed heavily. But if it's a dull broadhead, it won't cut the elastin. It's like a rubber band. It'll just stretch back and come back in place, and it won't open a big exit wound to bleed. So they did that for me, and I got interested in that and correlating the deer behavior at the time of the shot, an archery shot, the deer behavior until he went out of sight, and postulating, looking at the arrow, the blood trail, putting all that information together to speculate as to what organ damage would be documented and confirmed when you put them on the skinning shed. And I got up to about a 95% corollary between the organs that were involved based on the deer behavior, the arrow, and how the animal acted after the shot, confirming what organ damage was done, whether it was a bilateral lung shot or a liver shot or a paunch shot, etc. Now, you asked me to talk about how an animal would demise. I'm going to ask this group. I've got a archer out there. He's 20 feet up. He's got a deer that turns broadside. Then he turns away and he takes a shot. He gets a pass through. It sticks in the ground. The deer runs off. He's following the deer. The deer stops right at the edge. He may collapse there, or if he doesn't, he'll run into the woods and he may hear him crash, or he may not hear him crash. He waits till dark, and then he goes, he trails, and he finds this deer. What caused that deer? What was his demise? What was the cause of it? Now, I'm asking this group, you tell me what might kill a deer with an archery shot harvest. And yes.
I'm not going to answer it because I sat there listening to him, and I bet I can guess what you're asking us. What's the most common cause of death?
No, list the 6 causes of death.
Oh, 6 causes.
This podcast just went from slightly above average to
superb,
really freaking cool. Yeah. So anyway, let's go ahead. This is awesome.
I can't do all that, but I know what the couple of the main ones were.
All right, let's have them.
Well, collapsed lungs can be one of them.
All right, that's called a bilateral, both sides involved, pneumothorax, bilateral pneumothorax.
That's what you didn't let me finish. That's what I was fixing to say.
Bilateral collapse of the lungs. Now, circulation may still be intact, but ventilation is mismatched.
That's right.
Ventilation is gone. And a deer, on the average, when you do a bilateral pneumothorax hit, the deer can run, and the average time before they are immobilized ranges from 6 to 12 seconds. The average is 8 seconds before they're mobilized. They can, however, go out to 22, depending on any ancillary damage that's done to the pulmonary artery or the pulmonary vein. But if you just collapse the lungs, they're going to go down in the average about 12 seconds.
So think about it, and he probably knows this, how fast, when you hit one most of the time, they feel it really hard and they're off. I mean, sometimes I know you've had a few where arrows pass through, don't hit a bone. They kind of don't know what happened, but how far can a deer scared to death run in 12 seconds? A long ways.
All right,
200 and something yards.
What about one lung?
So back to his question. Let me get my second one, and I'll let y'all take it.
Wait, you're going to get the
because
both.
I
don't get both the easy ones.
Gotta let him finish.
Hemorrhaging.
Ah, God.
All right.
He got me.
We call that hemorrhagic shock. Correct. Hemorrhagic shock. And that when you have hemorrhagic shock, circulation is gone. You can hit one in the carotid artery or the femoral artery, and they bleed to death, and the ventilation is still intact.
Right.
So you have, again, ventilation, circulation mismatch. Now, back to the comment, a white-tailed deer has been clocked at 30 miles per hour. That's their top speed. And if they can go up to 22 seconds, they can cover over 3 football fields, distance-wise, 300 yards in that time before they go down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, pardon?
I got one. You go ahead.
Just mine.
I've got the next one. Y'all go ahead.
I want to go.
Go then.
Spine shot.
There you go. Neurogenic shock. When you hit one in the head, hit the cerebrum, or you transect the spinal cord, they go down in paralysis. You may or may not get one lung with it, depending on how high. And that brings up an interesting point. Whenever you hit a spine shot and the deer goes down, from an ethical standpoint, you should go ahead and shoot the deer the second time if you can. Sometimes they'll go down and get behind a log and you can't do it. But if you can shoot them a second time, why? Because the actual kinetic energy, when it hits the vertebra, it may cause enough temporary dysfunction of the spinal cord that they go down for temporary paralysis. And then when that wears off in 30 seconds or a minute, they can actually get up and run off. Mm-hmm. So to be ethical in harvesting big game, if they go down acting like a spinal shot, we should shoot them a second time for those 2 reasons. Now, another question. We've got spinal shock, hemorrhagic shock, bilateral pneumothoraces.
Infection, bacterial infection. How about that?
Excellent. Now, let's talk about that. When you have a gut shot or a paunch shot, the guy said, I hit the liver.
Bobby, you ought to listen to this.
Why y'all looking at me?
He said, a gut shot. Now, a gut shot, you can take it to the bank, 100% lethal. 100% lethal. What's the cause of death with a gut shot? Well, if it's the paunch, when you go down through the intestinal tract from the paunch to the small intestine, to the large intestine, the colon, to the rectum, anywhere in the intestinal tract, if you hit any of those 4 segments of the intestinal tract, it's a lethal shot. The bacterial count gets higher as you go further down toward the rectum. So you hit a deer in the paunch, it may take 12 to 24 hours for it to succumb from bacterial infection and septic shock. Whereas if you hit them in the colon or the rectum, the bacterial count is already high, and as soon as that gets in the bloodstream, they may very well die within just a few hours. Now, I actually shot one a few years ago, a quality buck that was at 40 yards, and I hit him, and I could tell it was a paunch shot. You knew the way it popped and it hurt. And I saw it go in, and it was too far back and too low. And I said, well, I'm not too proud to shoot again. So I was knocking another arrow, and as I did, he fell over. I said, what in the world? How did that happen?
Bled.
We never know. We never know and put him on a skinning rack until what kind of hit that we got. When I did a post-mortem autopsy on him, I found out that my broadhead had gone in the small intestine, hit the superior mesenteric artery, which is the main artery that supplies the small bowel, and he bled to death from hemorrhagic shock, just like Toxie said. But I didn't know that until I got down and did the post-mortem on him. And when you hit the superior mesenteric artery, it's just like hitting the renal artery to the kidney, or the carotid in the neck, or the femoral in the hip. They bleed out just like you had a heart shot. Now, we can go into the one lung shot when you're ready.
Well, I want to ask about that, and I want to ask about a liver shot as well. What would be a telltale sign that you got a liver shot?
The liver temporarily, has both a portal artery in and a portal artery out. A liver artery going in and a liver artery coming out. And when it comes out, it's actually desaturated, dark, wine-colored or grape-colored blood. And a lot of people said, I hit it far back. I think it was a liver shot. If it was a liver shot, you'll generally see the blood is not saturated. It's not bright red. It's dark, wine-colored or grape-colored, and that's typical for a liver shot. But you can actually hit a liver and not get in the gut, even though the liver is in the abdominal cavity where all the intestine is, where the small bowel, the large bowel are all inside the abdomen. You can actually hit the liver and not hit gut. But most of the time when you hit a liver, it passes on. If it's on an angle, you'll get gut as well.
So his question was, circling back, Bobby, he said, what are the possible causes of death? He had said there were 6 of them. We've only gotten 4. So go ahead. You got the other 2? Because I'm kind of at the end of my rope about that. That should cover everything, but I want to know, go ahead, because if we give, I want him to go ahead and tell us what those are.
you've done a great job. Turn your folders over and look.
Oh, we're allowed to look.
What's the last one listed?
Neuromuscular blockage.
Neuromuscular blockade. That's the pod.
Yeah.
In the state of Mississippi, we're the only state privileged to use pod as an extra insurance, if you would, on a marginal hit. And what succinylcholine does, succinylcholine or enectine is the drug, the pharmaceutical product that causes neuromuscular blockade. I use it every day in surgery to anesthetize a patient. And generally it takes 1 milligram of succinylcholine per pound of body weight for the patient. So if I have a 100-pound female that I'm going to do surgery on, it takes 100 milligrams of the succinylcholine given intravenously immediately, and it takes circulation time in about 20 seconds. They quit breathing because it paralyzes the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a muscular organ under our control. If we want to take a deep breath, we take a deep breath. But when you give succinylcholine or enectine, it actually blocks the neuromuscular area. We have a muscle, we have a nerve, and the fluid in between is called acetylcholine. Well, succinylcholine blocks that, and it can't transcend that area, so it paralyzes the diaphragm, and when they paralyze the diaphragm with enectine, they die of suffocation. And we use that. That is the last cause of potential death in the state of Mississippi. If you use a succinylcholine and you have a marginal shot, you don't get a lung, it doesn't collapse the lung, you don't have hemorrhagic shock. Well, when that gets into circulation and it circulates one time, it'll paralyze the diaphragm and they'll die from suffocation.
Are people still using
I
pods?
didn't say I didn't even know it was still legal. I
Yeah,
knew
it's legal in Mississippi.
when I first
I think West
started.
Virginia.
You know, it was the only state it was legal. And the point at the time was, you know, as he can attest, archery equipment was not that accurate in the early days. And so people were taking shots, and even at close range, and they weren't consistent. I mean, in fact, even before the days of the compound bow, you know, people were bow hunting. So
in the formative ages, I had the privilege to do some research with enectine, and I was bow hunting, and there's two categories of enectine. There's commercial, and there's biologic. Medicinal. Medicinal means it's 100% pure.
Right.
When you buy the succinylcholine or enectine from your local pro shop, it may be cut to 50% or so. The reason being it's still functional is in human beings, as I said, you give 1 milligram per pound of body weight. In the deer, which is hoofed animals, are 1,000 times more sensitive.
right.
So 1/10 of 1 milligram inside a deer will paralyze the diaphragm.
Wow.
But we loaded the pod up so much when it hits the deer, it's like a confectionate or powdered sugar. You know, you see a puff, you can put so much in it that's not necessary.
Wow.
But if 1 milligram gets inside the vascular system of hooved animals, then it's their demise.
Wow.
Did not know. I didn't. That's because that's the other. The major causes of death, you know, in 49 states anyway. We got those.
Yeah.
Got all of them.
Well, Toxie had flipped his over early now, so we know.
I thought all I saw was hemorrhagic, and I thought he was listing the demise of bow hunting, and I thought it said hemorrhagic disease because we just found one. The game warden went and looked this morning. We found one. I was worried about it, and they looked at it and said, "Yeah, it's got ADHD."
That's classic Toxie.
So I thought
he gets all his exercise jumping to conclusions. So, go ahead, Lane.
Yeah. So talking about the physiology of in a bow hunt, is there what we would call a no man's land? Is there a possibility of shooting through a deer broadside and going, me too, under his spine and over his lungs?
Oh yes, there's an area there that you can actually hit that is in the adjacent area of the aorta, running down the backbone, and the spinal cord, that you can actually miss both of them. Now, again, though, if you hit the vertebra without hitting the aorta or not hitting the spine, it can cause temporary paralysis and drop. But yes, you can hit in that anatomical area and not cause any damage. And when you get your arrow, it may have a little meat on it. That's it.
I did that, and it had green, like that bile, I guess, on it. It had cut, and it ended up. I ended up finding the deer, but it had no blood on it. and it was like a kind of a green film on it. It went right through. It wasn't double lung, but it was through the chest.
That would have been good.
And it was like, cuz was with me. He was videoing at the time, a long time ago.
Maybe you clipped his esophagus or something.
Well, I think it was like it'd be further down because it was, it was through the chest.
Did you smell of your arrow?
got a little.
Yeah, but it wasn't like the same smell as guts. It was
wasn't
like
cud.
It's got that waxy kind of.
Yeah, I just always I thought it was like the bile duct that maybe it hit or something.
Well,
but it was through the chest and it had no blood on it. It was like a green film. That didn't have a strong odor, but yes, it smelled.
Well, also the esophagus coming down, you could have been at the level at the top of the lungs. You got the lungs, you could have also got the esophagus. And that, quote, slime green could be content of the esophagus.
So there's definitely a no man's land.
Oh, yeah. I've experienced
all the more
it too.
reason to,
Okay.
bigger opening broadheads and whatever.
I don't want to bypass
The one lung, yeah.
the one
Yeah.
lung
Oh,
shot.
yeah, yes, sir. Sorry.
We hear that a lot. Folks say, well, I only
Got one
lung.
lung, a quarter into you, I'll do it.
Can a deer live on one lung?
In my opinion, a pretty good while.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about the healing of the rest of it, but
No,
my daddy's lived to be 94 on one lung, so I bet they can,
Okay, well, let me say this. Doing my tenure covering the emergency room for 30 years, I had numerous patients come into the emergency room with one collapsed lung as a result of a 22 shot to the lung, scissor stab, knife stab. The lung was collapsed. I got a chest x-ray and it showed a unilateral, one-sided collapsed lung. And the systemic pressure that we have in the aorta and the carotid and the heart is, when we take a blood pressure, normal blood pressure is 120 over 80. That's classic textbook. 120 is systolic. Diastolic, when the heart relaxes, is 80. The mean arterial pressure is around 90 in the systemic. The mean pulmonary pressure in the lung is 16. 1/6. 1/6. The pressure in the lung blood vessels is 1/6 the amount of pressure in the aorta and the heart and the femoral area. That means that it's much more. When we have a water hose and we turn it, we twist it down, it shoots further and further. That's the same principle as in the lung. When the pressure is high, it shoots further. You'll bleed quicker when it's in the carotid as opposed to in the lung. It's a lower pressure and it's much more apt to clot. Much more apt to clot. So when you shoot one lung and it goes down, when a patient came in the emergency room, all I did was put a chest tube in. I didn't take them to surgery. The lung is under negative pressure. When we take a deep breath, the atmosphere is one atmosphere of pressure. The lung is negative, and it has to be negative for it to expand when we take a deep breath. But when we equilibrate the intrathoracic pressure with the atmospheric pressure, the lung collapses. So all we have to do to expand that lung is to make it negative pressure again so the lung can expand. I put in a simple chest tube, smaller than my little finger, in there. I hook it up to negative pressure, put the suction on it. As soon as I suction on it, the lung pops right back up.
So I did wilderness first aid, and they said to jam a ballpoint pen in their chest and then put a little valve on the end of it, like a cut balloon or something.
To re-expand it, that's correct. That's in the field resuscitation.
Sure.
Now, once we do that, I take an x-ray every day, and after 2 days, I simply seal that off and clamp the negative pressure, take a chest x-ray, and then pull the tube out, and then seal it off with Vaseline and a dressing, and then I take another chest x-ray the next day. On the third day, I send them home with both lungs expanded. My whole point being this: we can live fine, as Mr. Fox has, on one lung. Deer and mammals can live fine. What causes a one lung death is if you hit a main or a medium pulmonary artery or pulmonary vein, then they'll die of hemorrhagic shock plus the one lung. But if one lung will not kill a deer unless there's secondary injury to the artery or a vein to have death by hemorrhagic shock. And I can prove that in the field. I've had guests hunt on my property, one lung shot. We waited 4 hours. We went back in. There was an animal weak, but he was still alive and was breathing and fine. And then when we took the deer shot again, when we took him back, one lung was clogged. Both lungs were collapsed then, but one side was freshly clotted, and the other still had saturated red blood in it, proving that one lung in itself is not always lethal.
Wow.
And you were explaining to me earlier the physiology of a bison versus a whitetail. Can you talk about that? Because it kind of relates to this.
Yeah, the mediastinum is the area between both lungs that separates. The mediastinum is the anatomical area that houses the esophagus, and it separates the left lung from the right lung. In the American bison, the buffalo, there's no mediastinum, so the right lung communicates with the left lung. So that's why the Indians were so efficient in spearing either the right or left lung, and that way both lungs would collapse because there was no separation between them.
Ha!
Wow.
That's interesting.
That is very interesting.
See these people? When the clock strikes 5, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. They have to do these things. They have to do those things. Enter the all-new LS Tractor MT2 and MT2E, a relentless force of innovation. Redesigned with a new hood and cab built for comfort and visibility, with enhanced lifting capacity to get the job done. Making these people the ones everyone else calls those people. Visit your local LS Tractor dealer today.
Hey, Lanny.
Hey, Bobby.
Have you ever wondered if your feeder went off? Or if it's even got corn in it?
Yeah, you sit there at night wondering about it.
Moultrie has solved this. This is some high-tech stuff.
Fits on any feeder that helps monitor the level of feed and lets you know if it went off or not. And you can remotely control it.
Can I look at your feeder if we're on the hub?
I really hope not, but we're going to have to talk to the guys at Moultrie about that. This is the biggest thing in feeders since corn.
That's saying a lot.
With Feed Hub, there's no more stressing, no more guessing. This technology allows you to remotely monitor your feeders.
You know, we always say feed safely, do it the right way.
No doubt about it.
To learn more about it, visit moultrieproducts.com/feedhub. It's a great invention.
Unbelievable technology and products brought to us by our buddies at Moultrie.
Can you explain?
He leaves no stone unturned.
No, he
promise you.
doesn't. It's amazing what you get interested in and how deep you drill into it.
Yeah, and I mean,
We call that a compulsive personality. And I had a compulsive personality with surgery. I had a compulsive personality with archery and bow hunting, and a compulsive personality with the iPhone and digital photography.
When did you get started bow hunting, and who introduced you to it?
In 1986, late 85, my son, Ben, did he ordered from a magazine a whitetail hunter compound bow.
Oh, yeah, I had one
That's
of
by
those.
Bear, isn't
That's
it?
by
And
Bear.
yeah.
Boys Bear.
He brought it to me and says, Dad, I want you to help me sight this in and tune it. Well, at the time, I had no friggin' idea what tune meant on the bow. Okay, and so I went to my local pro shop. I believe at the time it was called Four Seasons in Starkville. And I went in there and I said, my son has purchased a compound bow. I would like one as well. He said, well, do you want to use it for hunting or do you want to use it for competition? I said, why can't I do both? I said, well, you can. Are you left-eyed or right-eyed dominant? I said, I'm left-eyed dominant. He said, fine. Are you right-handed or left-handed? I said, I'm right-handed. Are you left or right-eyed dominant? I said, I'm left-eyed dominant. He said, fine, we'll order you a left-handed bow. I said, look, I can't do anything with my left hand. He said, oh, it'll be natural. It'll be natural to you. And he was right, because when we shoot with our non-dominant eye, we have to close our dominant eye. And what that does, it cuts down our depth perception in its entirety, and it cuts down 50% of the illumination from our ambient light at the time. So you're always ahead of the game when you shoot with your dominant eye open. And if it's your left-handed and your left-eye dominant, you should do that. 85% of our population is right-eyed dominant and right-handed. 15% is left-eyed dominant, and I'm left-eyed dominant, but I'm right-handed. And after a week, it was perfectly natural for me to shoot with my left hand.
wow. So I'm left-eye dominant and right-handed. So, but I screwed up on everything. I finally switched to I shoot left-shouldered, like rifle shotgun and all, but I shoot right-handed bow because I didn't really know.
Yeah.
And he's right, but I close my eyes, so I have to. But he's right, and it's not strong. But if I do the test, it's left eye dominant.
Hayden's the
I
same
like
way.
shot pool left-handed, ping pong and everything right-handed. I threw baseball right-handed. I punted some. I punted left-footed, so I'm all screwed up.
You punted?
Yeah.
Look at there. Learn something new every day.
Let's
I
talk,
mean, let's go to a small school.
let's talk about the properties of our broadhead.
Well, that's
there we go.
that was with the question.
Oh, that's a great one.
Keep us on track, Doc.
Look, help us make. How do we get the best blood trail?
Well, there's 6 criteria to produce a good blood trail. One bow hunter said, "Oh, I shot this with this broadhead, and it produced the best blood trail I've ever seen." The next fellow says, "Well, what is it?" "Well, it's the brand name. He buys it. I shot my deer, and I got him, but I had a scanty blood trail." So, same broadhead. Well, the situation, the 6 criteria of what produces a good blood trail is, number 1, the point of impact,
Yes.
the kill zone. That's number 1. If you're in the vital area of the lung and the heart area, then that's where you want to be. That gives you the best blood trail. Number 2, penetration. You need to penetrate and go through. The better the penetration, the greater chance you've got of an exit wound to have an entrance bleed and an exit bleed. All right, that's number 2. Number 3 is durability of your broadhead. If you shoot the broadhead and it penetrates and it hits the rib and one of the blades falls off, it's not durable and you won't have an exit wound. So the durability. Number 4 is the cutting surface. 2.5-inch broadhead in and out wounds is going to cause more blood to be lost externally than a 1-inch broadhead. So the 4th criteria is the cutting surface of the blades. The 5th criteria is the sharpness. The sharper the broadhead, the more tissue damage you're going to have. The more tissue damage you have, the more blood loss you're going to have internally and externally. And the 5th one is an unusual one. It's called rotation. For example, if somebody comes in the emergency room and they've got a stab wound that goes in and out, that's not liable to kill them as much as going in and twisting in, and as you come out, twist. As it rotates, you have more contact tissue surface area, more likelihood of more damage, more bleeding, better blood trail. So those are 6 criteria for the broadhead. So there's several broadheads out there that do that, and I've shot virtually all
So
of
you're
them.
a single bevel guy.
No, let me say this. We'll address that issue. What I wanted is the broadhead that gives me those 6 criteria.
Okay.
All right? Doesn't make any difference what 6 criteria if it's not accurate. The most accurate, and I shoot a mechanical.
Would not be, you can still prioritize them, although you'd like to have all of them.
Yeah.
Number 1 is the accuracy of
Oh, yeah.
shot placement. And number 2 would be sharpness of whatever you're shooting, I would think, would be number 2. And then from there, because I was just trying to get to where people shoot a variety of things, accuracy is everything.
Well,
and I know we all think we are, but I'm just curious, secondarily, if someone is shooting a 1-inch cut or whatever, isn't the sharpness the next most important thing? Wouldn't you rather shoot a sharper, smaller one than a dull, wider one, or does that matter?
No, I want penetration, and I want it durable. If it's durable, a mechanical will do everything. A fixed blade will.
Right.
A fixed blade is much less apt to fail than a mechanical because there's so many different parts to it. But the first thing I want out of my broadhead is accuracy. Doesn't make any difference. Okay.
Agreed.
Once it's accurate, then I want penetration. If it's sharp and everything's fine and it hits the rib, it doesn't go in but 6 inches, I'm not going to get the other lung.
So if we have the sharper it is, you think about looking under a microscope at the edge of a sharp broadhead or knife, that's a smaller surface area, talking about the physics of it. So wouldn't a sharper broadhead actually penetrate further too?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Why?
Okay.
Less resistance.
That's right, the physics.
Less resistance. Less kinetic energy is expended when it goes through the tissue, and the less energy that's expended, the further it will go.
Yeah, because you said, you made the comment that he reminded me, because I get to cheat. I listened to him for so long years ago, but there, you're shooting through little rubber hoses like garden hoses and stuff, and those artificial stuff are not just fall apart stuff. And so the duller your broadhead is, they just roll and don't cut them, and it slows your broadhead down. It doesn't penetrate. Everything's negative compared to the positive of a sharp one. And so
a good analogy of that is when we cut ourselves shaving with a sharp razor, it bleeds and bleeds and bleeds until we take a piece of tissue and stick it up there for something for it to clot on.
So when mine get dull, if I can't sharpen them, money or not, I just throw them away and get a sharp one. I just after spending, that's been 30 years, maybe 25 ago. I mean, after watching him, he taught me so much. Just go out there and, I know it's hard for me to shut your mouth and listen, but when he's at the skinning shed, it's just crazy to see and watch how the process he goes through. And I just said, I'm never shooting a dull broadhead no matter what again.
So sometimes there's a scenario, I just experienced one, where you had a complete pass through, but there was no blood trail. Virtually no blood trail, just a few sprays here and there. The deer was hit a little far back. But my question, what I'd like to learn is what could potentially cause it to not bleed? When you've got an entrance and an exit hole, does something fill that up?
Well, first of all, if you went through and collapsed both lungs and you didn't hit a large pulmonary artery or a medium pulmonary artery or vein, and I told you before, that blood pressure is only 1/6 of the blood pressure of the carotid and the femoral. So it's not apt to blow out. But if both lungs are collapsed and you didn't hit a main or a medium pulmonary artery or pulmonary vein, it's not got much blood to throw out. What blood's there by gravity is going to pull it down here until it builds up to that level before it shoots out. Mm-hmm. So you can have a bilateral lung collapse and very little blood, but usually if you have a bilateral lung collapse, you're going to see the deer go down or you're going to hear him go down because the average goes down between 12 and 16 seconds.
Mm. And you were telling us earlier too, that versus a rifle shot, the average time for a rifle shot to go down versus that double lung shot.
I had a study, and I shared that slide with Lanny earlier, that 27 deer that were shot with archery equipment through the lung, post-mortem showed that both lungs were collapsed, versus 27 hitting the same area with a rifle. And the difference was 26 seconds versus 29 seconds. In other words, it took the deer that were shot with a archery equipment, they stayed alive 3 seconds longer
than a rifle shot deer.
That's really kind of
double lung.
Yeah. That's an interesting statistic.
So I remember as a teenager, I guess it was, in the deer camp was a heart surgeon from down in Mobile, and I remember him telling everybody, because they were asking questions about, and this guy shot a deer, and I know I shot him right through the heart, whatever. And he said, so just so you know, and this is back then, you may know more than this guy said back then. He said, average, and it varies a little bit, average, you just like reach inside and jerk somebody's heart out. They got 8 seconds to still be alive. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't know if he just said, no, I'm not a deer surgeon, I'm a heart surgeon, but he said back then, it's like, you still have 8 seconds. So, and his point too was even in 8 seconds, your deer could still run a long way, shot right through the heart.
Well, what causes the demise of the animal is organ failure. It may be lung ventilation goes out, but what causes demise is lack of oxygen to the vital organs, okay? Now, the circulation time in mammals, that means if you inject something into the vein in the antecubital fossa and it goes up back to the heart and it gets into the heart, it's oxygenated and it goes out the aorta, and it goes from the aorta up to your tongue till you taste it. That's called circulation time. Circulation time is about 12 seconds.
How about that?
So if in mammals, if you actually shoot an animal and you have total circulation failure, like in the heart, right, the carotid, or what have you, it's going to take that 8 to up to 22 seconds. The average is around 12 to 16 seconds, which is the same analogy as yanking your heart out and you got 8 seconds to live. Well, that's why when people shoot lighted knock and it hits right in the perfect place and you got both lungs and it goes through and it sticks in the ground, you see a lighted knock, the deer runs out with blood squirting out both sides. You said, that deer is dead, he just doesn't know it yet.
Yes. So true, the fastest like death would be from, I say this, a faster death would occur from major bleeding, like the femoral artery or whatever, than it would from double lung collapsed lungs too, right?
Well,
which one would do it faster?
Both of them cause organ failure. First of all, what keeps the animal alive is oxygenated blood to the brain and the organs.
Right.
Now, if that oxygenated blood doesn't come because of hemorrhagic shock, it's still 8 to 12 seconds. If that saturated blood comes as a result of failure of ventilation, it's still 8 to 12 seconds.
Okay.
So hemorrhagic shock doesn't kill any quicker than what kills the demise is mismatch between oxygen and the ventilation and circulation. And it doesn't make any difference which one fails.
Okay.
The end results is the demised animal immobilized on the ground in 12 to 16 seconds.
So when you're up at tree stand, Doc, and you're enjoying yourself and you've got a shot at an animal, a quality buck as you refer to them, how are you thinking about that shoulder and trying to stay behind that shoulder? Does that do you fear that the shoulder?
Actually, I do. I do because we now know that because of the kinetic energy and resistance, inertia of resistance of various tissues, the scapula is hard to penetrate and get both lungs at best. Sometimes you can hit the scapula and not even get one lung.
Yeah, it's in front of them, isn't it?
Pardon?
Wouldn't it be in front of them if you hit the scapula?
Oh, yeah. If you hit the scapula, the lungs, the majority of the lungs are covered up by the scapula. But you can hit the front part of the scapula and penetrate it and still not necessarily get the lung. Right. But my point is this: if you get both lungs, if you shoot behind, I like to just anatomically, if you draw a straight line through the midsection of a deer and you go about 4 to 6 inches behind the scapula, the shoulder blade, and draw a vertical line, where that crisscrosses is where you want to shoot. Mm-hmm. The closer you can hit to the scapula behind it and not hit it, the better off you are making an arrow and getting in the gut, which is further toward the hindquarters. But now back to penetration. I actually, with Houdini, shot and I hit the scapula. It went through that scapula. It went through the right lung. It went through the left lung. It went through and hit the left scapula, and the point stuck out and it broke the skin, and there was a hematoma around it, but I had no exit wound. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm shooting a Raven 500R, 500 feet per second, which produces 3 times the kinetic energy. Kinetic energy, it takes about 30 foot-pounds of kinetic energy for the whitetail. The R500 shoots in excess of 90 foot-pounds. So I had enough to penetrate both, but that's not the usual and customary. If had I been with my 50-pound compound bow, I might not have even penetrated this right scapula.
Dr. Bumgardner, up a tree, got a quality buck out there. He's at 30 yards. He's feeding on some white oaks. You're excited. You've got a 30-yard pin. Are you holding it low? Are you anticipating that? Now, it's a 5.5-year-old buck out there, not a little old 90-pound doe. Are you anticipating him dropping?
Are you aiming low? Yeah.
When they're standing straight up and the head up, they've got to go down to load and then come back to jump, and it takes twice as much time. So you have twice as much time for your arrow to get there. So it's much more lethal of a shot if you shoot them with the head up and aim in the lower third of the chest.
We were talking about that this morning.
Totally.
And I would think the weather, whether the deer appears to be keyed up or not, there's factors. I mean, if it's kind of windy and you think it may not quite, but.
But his point is a good one about even Dudley's right. We all they're so nervous. But the chances are less, in other words, they couldn't travel as far down with the head up as they could, because all they got to do if the head is down is just collapse,
right?
Because that's what they do. The front end collapses as low as it can, so they can push off to run off. It's not jumping the string anyway. It's just their instinctive. This is how I get away from danger, and they're so wired for sound. So he made a good point. I've never really made it a practice of mine like that. I've just kind of been conscious of if they're really nervous or not, but. If the head is up, it's going to give you because you're talking about a 20-yard shot. A millisecond is a big deal.
Yeah. Well,
and you can go all over YouTube and see examples of people slowing the video down and seeing them duck.
They can still duck, but
Yeah.
they
A
can't get in as
A good
quick.
analogy. A good analogy of that same concept is this: you got a beaver trap, you load the beaver trap, and then you fire the beaver trap. If the beaver trap is already loaded, it takes a whole lot less time to fire it. So when their head is down, it's loaded. When the head is up, the trap is not loaded. They've got to go down to load it, then they've got to react to it.
So do you think that's different for a little old 90-pound, 100-pound doe as it
Yes.
is for a mature buck?
Yes, I think it's the same.
I think I think there's a latitude thing going on as well.
Yeah.
I feel like you get further north, they don't seem. I don't know if there's any science behind that.
I don't think there's athletic. I mean, you think about it, a 180-pound mature whitetail, just in general, no matter where it is, versus a 250-pound mature whitetail, it's got to be more agile. I mean, is a running back more agile than an offensive lineman? So, yeah, a bigger deer probably they'll do it, but not as quick. The fastest string duckers I've ever seen have been a wired doe,
What do you think?
Yeah.
Well, I do.
Dr.
I think, yeah. I think that anatomically, that a 90-pound doe can probably react quicker than a 200-pound buck.
So do you, as a practice, you don't ever aim low for expecting that, or you?
I aim low every time. I aim at the heart area, the lower third of the chest, behind the scapula, 2 or 3 inches behind the scapula.
If they don't move at all, you still got them.
Yeah.
So, Doc, can you tell us about? I understand you fell from a tree, maybe broke a leg, and my understanding is that while in the woods laying there, you set the leg yourself before you. Is there any truth to that?
Actually, I was in September of each year. I go out at that time back in 2004 is when that happened. I had 40 lock-ons. I don't use lock-ons anymore, but I had 40 lock-ons, and in September I go out and I service all of them. I derust them, I paint them, I oil them. If the bands around the tree gets a little tight, I loosen it up to be sure it's safe for all my guests and anybody using the lock-on to be as safe as possible. I was on stand number 36 of 40 in September of 2004. I never touch a tree stand until I have my 4-point harness system on and my lines was belt around. I go up about 20 feet. My tree stands are typically 24 feet high. My lock-ons are 24 feet high. I go up to about 20 feet and stop right there on the stick ladder, and I throw my lines of belt around and clip it in. On the stand number 36, when I was going up, I got up to the tree stand was about 4 feet above me, and I threw my lines of belt around, and when I was in the process of hooking it on, the commercial stick ladder came unwelded, and I fell back 22 feet, and I had enough instinctive about me that I flipped, and rather than land on my head, I landed on my side. And as I did, I said, well, I can breathe. I'm alive. I felt 22 feet at 180 pounds at the time. And I looked down at my feet. I could move my hands, and I looked at my feet, and my left foot was going to the sky. My right foot was out to the right. So I knew something wasn't quite right, and I fell to the ground, and I felt the break. My femur.
Oh, femur.
My femur was broken just above my knee. And after about half a minute, the muscles, when it fractured, that bones shortened. And as it shortened, the muscles tried to pull it back, and they went into spasm. So I took my good foot, and I put it on my bad foot, and I pushed down, and as I did, it popped back as it should. And then I had with me, my cell phone wouldn't work in that area, so I left it at my four-wheeler. And I actually took, I had a 23-foot extended rope, and I cut sections, and I mobilized my foot, and I took one section of the stick ladder out, and I actually made that as my splint, and I splinted it, and I spent the night. Once I pushed it down and realigned the bones, the muscle spasm quit. I no longer was nauseated, and I wasn't in shock, and I had no pain. So I spent the night.
Wow.
I spent the night in the woods, and the helicopter crew found me the next day.
I bet you were cold.
But it was
gosh.
September, and all I had on was a T-shirt, and I had a surgical towel with me, and I kept the mosquitoes off of me with that surgical towel through the night. One of my parents gave me a watch that had illuminating dial on it, and I could see every 5 minutes through the night what time it was.
Wow.
And it was a long night. It was still dark. I was right next to the river, and I heard a tugboat coming, and they had the music playing real loud. I had a whistle, but they couldn't hear my whistle. And they went by, and I could smell the bacon cooking and what happened.
Oh, man.
Wow. Oh, my gosh.
Well, at 2 o'clock before that happened, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I saw a helicopter going over with lights shining down. I said, they may be looking for me. Well, I always called in when I finished at 6 to 7 o'clock in the evening, called home and told my wife, I'm done. I'm leaving the property. I'll be home in an hour. And when I didn't call, she knew something was wrong. So she immobilized the neighbors, and they came over, and they got the local people, and they said, our husband is out there on the property somewhere. And the law enforcement officer first said, oh, he's probably just out somewhere juking. And my neighbor said, he is not a juker.
I could have answered that one. That was not an option.
He said he is a professional. He's a surgeon. And so they then took him serious, and they started looking. Well, the next morning, the helicopter crew ran out of fuel, so they went back Tuscaloosa, and the moon went in, and it got cloudy, and they couldn't see. But they came back the next morning, and they saw my four-wheeler. The helicopter crew saw my four-wheeler in the power line food plot, and they said, we see his four-wheeler, but we don't see him. So they called, and the ground crew, the helicopter crew called the ground crew. The ground crew went out to my four-wheeler, and they said, we see him, we see the four-wheeler, but don't see. I heard him talking. I said, hey, I'm over here. I wasn't 100 yards from it. They came through, and they finally got to me, and they said, boy, are we glad to see you. And I said, let me tell you something. It's a friggin' two-way street.
Wow.
So then they took me back and put me on the
gosh.
helicopter and took me into Columbus to the orthopedic surgeon on call. Dr. Ray, Charlie Ray, was the orthopedic surgeon on call. And he said, he took the picture, and he said, here, it's fractured, and I got to put in pins and wires. He said, I figured you'd have to do open reduction, internal fixation. He said, yes, I do. I'm going to have to do that. He said, but I'm not going to take your splint off until I get you in surgery under anesthesia, because I want to show my surgical and anesthesia crew what a real field splint's supposed to look like. So after surgery, he came in the recovery room. He brought my splint in there, and he said, you might want to consider saving this because it may have saved your life.
Wow.
And I still have my splint.
Wow.
Well, I got to ask you.
Man,
I
what
think,
a story.
what a story. You turned, didn't you turn 84 not long ago?
This month I turned 84.
How do you,
Hit
give
the
us some,
horns for
I know,
that.
hit the horns.
I
man.
mean,
What are you
stand
doing?
on the horn.
Yeah.
Good gracious.
What are some of the keys for you staying so sharp physically and
Yeah,
mentally?
that's a
'Cause
great
I'm
question.
trying to get where you are.
That's
Yeah.
actually the question
Yeah,
of
it is.
questions.
Well, like I said, I tend to be a compulsive personality, compulsive obsessive personality. And my wife about 8 years ago said, you ought to consider a structured exercise program. I go out to the wellness center. Well, it's almost 10 years now. I went out there and got with Eddie Miles, who is the director of the wellness center, and he put me through a program to maintain. I told him that bow hunting was my major pastime, and he says, well, we need to build on upper body strength. And he said, do you climb? I said, yes, every time. He says, we'll do every other one. We'll do your lower bodies, and we'll alternate. And for the last decade, I've done that, and I can still easily climb, and I climb 25 to 30 feet with each bow hunt.
That's awesome.
That's great.
And I have my oatmeal and my prunes
Ready to go.
every morning, and my oatmeal keeps me my cholesterol under control, and along with the prunes, I don't have to tell you what that keeps me
Yes,
under
that
control.
sounds good.
The Ferminator is the industry's most versatile piece of food plot equipment, allowing plotters to do every step of the process, working the soil, adding seed and soil supplements, and compacting. From start to finish with a single implement. It's hassle-free by design. Set it for the seed size and simply drive the tractor, and the Ferminator does the rest. Check it out at theferminator.com.
Nosler is known for their bullets, and now they're making suppressors. Nosler suppressors are made for hunting. Adding a Nosler suppressor to your rifle will make you a quieter, more accurate, and more effective hunter. Protect your hearing and disturb less game with a Nosler suppressor. The time to hunt quiet is now. Learn more at nosler.com. Do you read a lot and study a lot?
Oh yeah. I I have my upstairs is my computer room where I teach, and I have both Macintosh platforms and Windows platforms. My graduate students come in, I teach up there, and to keep up, they'll ask questions, and sometimes I don't have the answer. Fortunately, I home test for Apple, and I have a direct line 24 hours a day. I can call in and talk to the engineers and designers of the Apple phones, and if I don't know the answer, I call them, they find the answer and call me back, and I let my students know what it is. So it's a two-way street. I learn when the students don't know something, they ask me, then I know after that.
Yes, sir.
They say,
That's great.
Wow.
They say learning is so important to
Yeah.
maintaining
keeping your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard. There's a difference. I would tell me if I'm right or wrong. There's a difference between watching something on your phone and listening to something on your phone and even kind of reading on your phone and maybe reading a book. I don't know, because I don't know if it's the same thing, but Diane, I've used her as an example. Diane's grandmother lived right at 103. And until she actually, cancer got her at 102 and a half, I guess it was. But she read a book like every day, basically. She read, and when she put one down, she was picking up another, and she read, and she read, and she read. And I'm telling you, past 102, her mind was as sharp as I would not have wanted to debate her. And I just always, and of course, she physiological things too, Doc, but I just got to believe, reading and that active mind has got to play a part in it.
Keep your body and mind active.
I need to work on my reading.
Yes.
If you don't use it, you'll lose it.
I guess my thing, there's a difference between watching TV
Right.
and reading
Yeah,
for your mind, I would think.
That's right. It also, you can read, but doing the actual thing is more instructive than actually reading about it once you do it, okay?
Right.
Well, after I finish here, I tried yesterday to get a haircut. When I went in, there were 10 people there. I'll go back today and to get my haircut. When I'm there waiting my 45 minutes, I'll be reading on my phone.
Right.
I
Yep.
never have a silent moment. I'm always reading or preparing or doing something, and that keeps my mind polished.
A sponge.
Love it.
So, Doc,
I like that. Mind polished. You need some
yeah,
polishing.
my mind needs some polishing.
I know mine.
Bobby used all the polish on his, got rid of his hair up there.
The reason I use the word polishing your mind,
Yeah.
because when you polish something, what does it do? It shines.
Shines. I like it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I like all the things you're saying.
So there's so much about you that's impressive, very impressive.
Everything.
Intriguing.
When I think about our listeners, I think we've got some young listeners that are probably just getting married, maybe have been married a while. Have you got any marriage advice
Oh, man.
That's a good question.
for somebody that loves to hunt as much as we all do?
A little late for that now, Bobby. for
Well, I
you,
mean,
right?
I've learned the hard way, but
Yeah, marriage, let me tell you, my wife just went through open heart surgery in May. She had 4 cardiac procedures done. She had mitral insufficiency and regurgitation, and it got progressively worse when she had a problem with high blood pressure. So she ended up in the hospital, and she went and had mitral valve replacement. She had an atrial clip. She had 4 different cardiac procedures done. And the convalescent time for that is 3 to 4 months to getting over it. She had it done in June. She went in the hospital in May. We had the surgery done in June. From June until now she has convalesced to the point she's driving herself, and she's going back to cardiac rehab. And I knew she was getting better when 2 weeks ago she said, I'd like to drive myself to get my nails done.
There we
There
go.
we go. Yes,
So
sir.
I knew that things were getting
Praise
close.
the Lord.
So with that, I was able to go hunt 3 days, a weekend, doing the velvet season. And but I go through that to say this: whatever you can do to reciprocate with what she does for you. For example, this past year, doing the entire year coming up to Mother's Day, I wrote down everything that my wife did for me and my family to keep us intact, from grocery shopping to washing dishes to doing clothes, everything she does for our family. I wrote all that down. I went out and I got a card at Walmart, and a Mother's Day card, and I wrote all these things down and typed it out, and I says, we will not forget you. We really appreciate these 22 things you do to keep our family intact.
Wow.
I gave that to her, and it brought a tear. But the main point is, don't accept and assume anything that the wife does. Recognize it, appreciate her, and express your appreciation to her. That will keep any mate intact with the marriage.
Hey,
Amazing
there you
advice.
go.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And you get to go hunting.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we all want to do is be able to slip off on the weekends and go and not have to
But in that period since
do a
June,
bunch of
I've
honeydew
learned how
deals.
to wash dishes, scramble eggs, do eggs sunny side up and not, and I've learned how to wash the clothes, hang the clothes, dry the clothes, do the grocery shopping. I've learned all that.
Hey, and let me say this, I bet you, I'm going to step out on this, and you do it cheerfully, I bet.
Oh, absolutely.
So important,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Absolutely. There's a little thing in life called self-esteem.
There you go.
And self-esteem, I had Dr. Bob Pfizer, who was at my gross anatomy table in med school. He subsequently became head of the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Arkansas Medical Center. He was there for about 4 decades. He finally succumbed to Parkinson's disease. But he said during his active tenure as head of the department, he says, we all work hard for one of two reasons or a combination of both. Number one, for financial reimbursement for security for our family, or for self-esteem to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. We do that for one of those two reasons. And that's why we all actually do what we do, to either receive financial reimbursement for security for our family or to make us feel better about ourselves.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So this great big deer you killed, Houdini.
Houdini.
You gonna put him in the Pope and Young book, or would he would probably make
Maybe
Boone and Crockett.
Yeah.
Well, he'll make Boone and Crockett. He qualifies criteria. A 10-point typical for Boone and Crockett's 165, and he was 175. And once he drives with no deductions, he said, "I'll be surprised if he drops below 2 or 3 points for deductions because he's so symmetrical." But Boone and Pope and Young requires a vertical bow, either. Does not allow crossbow.
Oh, I
I
can
didn't
cross
know
that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought it was 170 on the Boone and Crockett. What is it? 165?
165 is typical.
Typical.
165. I figured if anybody knew that, you would.
I thought it was 170. I've learned something
I did
today.
too.
So, what about historically? Have you killed a lot of Pope and Young animals?
I've killed 7 Pope and Young animals.
Did you put them in the book?
Did not. I killed a antelope. That's an interesting story. An antelope in Nebraska.
Now, they have some blood pressure, buddy. I know deer do, but I've never seen anything like the bleeding from an antelope.
Let me tell you what I did one time. Everybody, just to get a little, I'm fixing to. I sat in a cave behind Toxie in Colorado.
right.
We dug a hole and backed in, and I sat behind
No,
him.
the hole was already there. But
hole was there.
We were in a hole.
We looked for rattlesnakes, and we crawled up in this cave.
Forgot that was you.
And I sat there behind him with a camera and filmed him killing a giant pronghorn with
It
his
was,
bow.
it was a Pope and Young.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you,
But
when it turned, there was a jug of blood like an inch,
A hose.
just
Wow.
like a garden hose, and it shot out several feet and just was pouring. I've never seen such blood pressure behind any animal.
I sat within 8 inches of Toxie for like 5 hours. That was the tightest I had
But you
ever-
know, it wasn't as bad as I thought because it was so dry. If it had been back here, we couldn't have done it. 'Cause
I was
it was
worried-
like 90 degrees.
I was worried about rattlesnakes the whole time. But anyway, that was a great antelope.
It isn't something I went back and did again, but it was a good experience. I forgot you were sitting there. I don't know why I thought it was
I had an
someone else.
antelope experience. I took one of my bow hunters from Alabama to Nebraska. We got out there the day before the season opened, and the landowner, we called him, says, "We're here." He says, "Where are you now?" And I says, "Well, we're in town." He says, "Well, I'm out here changing all my blinds." I says, "Why?" He says, "Well, it rained last night, and all the antelope were coming to my feet, my water troughs for my cattle. But with puddle up blood, they won't come. Puddle up water, they won't come there. They'll drink it. So I'm moving it to a field with a green field, alfalfa." I said, "Fine." Well, we went hunting the next day, and he said, "Can you shoot out to 60 yards?" I said, "I have a broadhead sighted in to 50 yards. I have a 60-yard pin, but I haven't sighted in yet." He says, "Well, we'll do that tomorrow." I said, "Okay." So we went out, and we were out in the sagebrush field, and he went out there, and he had a 1-foot backstop target, and he set it down, and he backed off with his rangefinder. He said, "Okay, that's 60 yards. Let's see what you can do." I said, "No, wait a minute. We just drove 2 days from from Mississippi and Alabama. Let me be sure that my equipment is on. Let me shoot at 20 yards. And I did, and I was on. So then he moved it out to 60 yards. And I had it tuned so that my broadhead and my field point were the same. So it was so windy that I had to actually sit down on my heel to stabilize myself as I shot at 60 yards. And I shot, and I held and held and held and finally shot. And the landowner said, I couldn't tell where it hit. He looked and he says, "You're good, shoot another one." I shot another one, same scenario, wind blowing. I held, shot. He said, "Okay, you're good, let's go." Went up and pulled it. God be my witness, I had Robin Hooded.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my gosh.
And he
60
pulled it out
yards.
and he gave it to me. He said, "Let me tell you what, Doc," said, "tomorrow when you kill your Boone and Crockett antelope, I want you to mount it with this Robin Hood." So in my den right now, I've got a Boone and Crockett, not a Pope and Young. I've got a Pope and Young antelope with my Robin Hood below it.
Wow. That's great.
Wow.
So our trivia, we've got one of our listeners has left a review. Who is that person, Richie?
We got M. Zerbel.
M's or Bell?
And what M. Zerbel win?
He won a GK podcast T-shirt.
Okay, Glenny, those are on the website. They can
Yes,
go to the
they
GK
are,
store.
GKshop.com.
It's a great looking T-shirt. And today's trivia question is brought to you by Tartar Gate. Lanny, they make some great discs. You've been using that black one.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All fall. So.
Pretty heavy equipment. And Toxie, they make something I think you ought to take a look at. It's a rake that can go, but for like fire lanes, that might be useful if you were like cleaning out leaves down a road or something that you didn't want to drop a disc
I was doing
on.
that this weekend. Why didn't you send me one over?
Well, I didn't have one to send, but I just noticed that they had those.
Well, all you got to do is put one in my closet and not give it away.
Yeah. So y'all check out Tartargate. It's on Instagram. It's at Tartargate is their Instagram handle.
Tartar.
What's
yeah,
Bodoc
they
playing
make
for?
a lot
Is
of
it
good products.
Companion shirt, Mossy Oak hat.
He is playing for a Companions T-shirt.
Nice.
Yes. So if you
The
get
best
this
T-shirt
right,
on the planet.
if you get this right, Doc, you win a T-shirt.
Oh, okay.
All right. So National Deer Association did a survey on broadheads. So which broadhead, fixed or mechanical, has a higher rate of deer recovery, fixed or mechanical?
The fixed has a higher recovery rate, in my opinion, but it depends upon which mechanical you're using.
That's a good
But
question.
you consider 14 commercially available mechanicals, and you put them all average of recovery and lost deer versus fixed blades. I would say the fixed blade has the higher recovery rate.
Well, according to the National Deer Association, the mechanical has a higher recovery rate of 91% compared to the fixed at 82%.
But
Go ahead.
Kenny Thompson says,
Yeah. Well, yeah. We've talked about broadheads a lot. It's been kind of interesting learning different. Everybody's got a different opinion.
So
about
you know,
Yeah, and that's one study,
Well,
too.
there's so many differences and stuff, and he talked about the number one thing is accuracy, and I would guess in most cases, people taking longer shots with these these bows with high performance bows, you're gonna, even if just things in the environment, more chances for a fix to be inaccurate way down range. And so my point saying is that the one differentiator I would guess, and he know more than me, he's such a brilliant statistical mind though, that accuracy takeaway would make the difference more than anything. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, let me say this. With a less accurate broadhead, you're not going to have the point of impact at the same as the point of aim, so you may have a gut shot, and that deer is not recovered. Lethal, but he's not recovered. So my assessment of the fixed blade versus the mechanical, accuracy is the point, and if can be as accurate with the mechanical as you can at fixed blade and vice versa, unequivocally, the mechanical is more accurate than a fixed blade.
Hey, last question from me. When you're doing these autopsies, we talk about hitting them in the paunch, and then we talk about guts, and is there a scenario where a guy might take out a deer's kidneys, and is that a lethal hit?
The renal artery, the blood supply to the kidney, is a small target, but 100% lethal. If you hit the kidney or the renal artery to the kidney, it's like hitting the carotid or the femoral. They'll bleed to death just as quickly. Now, speaking of that, my wife got into trouble that made her mitral regurgitation worse was she had a spontaneous bleed from a benign tumor of her right kidney in May.
Wow.
And she bled into shock, and we took her to the emergency room, and they gave her blood and transferred her to North Mississippi Medical Center for emergency surgery. But the bleeding from the right kidney, the right renal artery, put her in shock. And if you hit the kidney or the renal artery, it's just as lethal as hitting the carotid or the femoral.
So, yeah, here's one real quick too, Bobby, is for everybody out there to learn. There's a lot of most frequently asked questions about bow hunting, but for my own learning, to be sure, because I've got my own lifetime of experiences, but I would almost always yield to you. So for average listener, you go shoot the deer, you feel pretty good. Maybe you don't feel pretty good. You find your arrow, and there it is. It stinks. You know you pawned shot in some form. On average, what would you tell them? Because, I mean, a lot of people I've always heard, wait 4 hours to go back. And my experiences are that's not enough time. So how long would you wait if you smell guts on your arrow?
If I smell gut on my arrow, it depends on the weather.
Yes.
And if I have gut on my arrow, I know it's lethal. And if it's summertime and I know the meat will spoil if it's overnight, I generally if it's certainly during the daytime, I'll wait 4 hours or so and I'll go after it. But if it's cold weather and the meat's going to be good, and I'll wait overnight and go after them.
Right.
The worst thing is if you do that, the coyotes will get to that.
That's right.
So you have to take it under consideration. Another consideration is I think it's lethal. I got a blood trail here, but it's definitely gut. And, I've got rain predicted here within the hour. If it washes out your blood trail, you have to take that under consideration. So since 100% lethality, and we've already talked about how long it takes them to die, the higher up the intestinal tract, the longer it takes them to die. The lower the intestinal tract, like the colon and the rectum's got higher bacterial count, they die quicker.
You only bow hunt now?
That's correct. Since I killed my first deer in 1986, I don't hunt with a firearm anymore. I get a bigger thrill out of it.
There's nothing like it.
And I'll say this. I hunt alternate 5 different states: Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And of those 5 states, last year I shot 21 animals, and I recovered 20 of them.
There you go.
That's a good rate.
Yeah, it is.
Dr. Joe Bumgardner, the only way I can say it, you're a hell of an interesting guy.
He is a machine, is what he is. You can learn so many, beyond the obvious. We learned so much from him. But number one is being thorough.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I don't think I've ever known anybody as thorough, topic to topic through life as he is. Now, I know they're out there, but I hadn't met them. Mm-hmm. So what a study for that. And the other thing, he's such a great person, and so he gave us that tip. It's like, how meaningful and powerful is it for random acts of kindness in life? He was talking about in marriage, but just in general, Bobby, I'll call him out. Bobby's really, really good at that too. He loves doing stuff kind of for no reason at all, an act of kindness. But I would venture to guess that has something to do with him being so healthy at his age, is having that kind of heart like that. So, let's all learn from it. It'll inspire me more just having spent a little time with him today.
Well, I had mentioned I hunt with the tree walker treestand, and we had talked about that a little bit. But when I hunt, my usual and typical is this. I take, if I go in like with Houdini, if I'm going to climb a tree, I'll have my tree walker on my back. I have my backpack, which is 38 pounds with all the stuff I put in it, on my chest.
Wow.
And then I have my 18-pound crossbow on my neck, and I walk in hands-free. Oh. And I have my light, on my
No wonder
head.
You're in such good shape.
Yeah. And but I'm balanced. I've got 38 pounds here and 38 pounds on the back, and I'm balanced with my hands free.
That guy, we had a fitness instructor for bow hunters on, and one of the things, your balance is get like a bucket of sand or something like that in each hand, but be sure you have something in both hands because you have to teach yourself the balance and your muscles to balance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me say this. I have not demonstrated the tree walker to any of my bow hunters, but what they ended up buying it, and I have no commission in it whatsoever. I have not shown the severed broadhead to anybody, but what they ended up buying it. because it works for me. And I've done product reviews on both of those, but I get no commission for it. And if it works for me 100% of the time, then I feel obligated to share it.
Absolutely.
Well,
That's what great about bow hunting community.
That's what a spokesman should be like.
yeah, and look, a lot of people try different stuff and find things that work for them, and then they become passionate about it. It makes perfect sense.
Well, I mean, they all work to some degree, but
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
like for him, it's like what works best.
What's your first preference?
You know.
Well, I tell you, I'm just you're just very inspirational, and just
Yes.
I mean this with the utmost respect. 84 years of age, climbing trees, carrying your ladder stand in.
Yeah, and he's out there, you know, but he's living
there's-
that life out there connected to nature. And how fulfilling is it to be spending a time like you do in the woods? That's what's so addictive about bow hunting is just that, you know, even if you take a shot, you don't disturb much. It's just something about that connectedness of the bow hunter guy to nature.
One of the successful things we do is try to be undetected by our game.
Absolutely.
And that's a whole different topic session about what we do. But I've built a routine that I use for me, and it's been successful. I've used it now for over 5 years, and I've had 2 deer blow at me using that routine. Wow. Both deer were behind me, wind in my face. They did not smell me. I heard them coming up, and when I stood up and turned around to see what it was, then they saw my motion. Then they blew and ran off. I kill as many deer from behind me coming in as I do where I expect them to come from. Because I use a combination scent destroyer and an attractant aerosol that I put on my body as I go in. But using that routine, it's like anything. If you break the routine, you're not going to get the usual end results you expect. But I have eliminated any problems with climbing with the tree walker, and for me, I have eliminated any scent problems. Sure, I wash my clothes and I take a bath and all that type stuff, and I watch the wind direction, but I've killed just as many deer when the wind was not in my favor.
Well, Dr. Bumgardner, we've enjoyed this. Is there anything else, Lanny?
You could do this all day. I could think of something to ask him.
back.
I mean, it's
Ask more
stuff that I
questions.
believe. I think I know already, but when he's here, I'm just saying, hey, I'm going to bounce this off of you so I'll know for sure or not, you know.
Yeah.
'Cause
And I've always, it's amazing to me. He's so smart, but we're thinking about, well, we hit him and we got double lungs, but he's going to the detail to learn.
Yeah, but we talk about one of the problems in society today is like everybody's got an opinion and they think opinion is fact. And he has a research-driven mind, so every single thing is a research project. So he's not just spouting his opinion; he's out to prove it first, and then he'll let you know the results. And that's what, just like the interview here today is so refreshing that he's not just spewing his opinion all the time. You know, he's gone and proved it, you know.
It's backed by fact. 2 things I want to say. First of all, we were talking about succinylcholine, the pod. During early formative stages, I had the medicinal form, the 100% form, available to me in a powder, and I used it in the pod, and I had a quality buck come out, and I was in a water area where it was about 6 to 8 inches of water, and I found a tree I could climb that wasn't watered at the base, and I climbed. I had a pod loaded, and the deer was at 40 yards, and it was back when I had a rangefinder, the type that when you used it, it had 2 eyes in it, and when you put them together and it was one image, you looked down, it said 28 yards.
Yeah, I
all
remember
right.
those.
Well, I had him at 40 yards. When he got right in front of me, I realized he wasn't going to get any closer, so I shot him, and I didn't shoot in the lower third. He ducked. I hit him high. He went down. I spined him, so I knocked another arrow, and as soon as he went down in the water, I heard. He was sucking water into one of the lungs that I hit, in addition to the spine. So I was knocking another arrow, and once I saw that he went down, and I said, "Oh, he's sucking water into the lung. That's going to be lethal." And so I didn't shoot again. And about 30 seconds, when the succinylcholine hit him, he started fasciculating because it makes the muscles quiver, and he did that. The bottom line is that it wasn't his day. But
No.
but the whole point is really, if you hit them where you're supposed to, like in the lungs and get them, that's lethal. If you hit a spine shot, shoot them again, because not always is it lethal, but it usually is. And then thirdly, you don't have to have succinylcholine if you hit them where you're supposed to.
There you go.
Yeah, I really don't know anybody in today's modern times that's using it.
I barely knew anybody in the very early days.
I used it early. I did. It was part of growing
I
up. So we
never
used it.
did.
Yeah, we made our own pods and everything.
I was like just a little scared of it, even to be
Yeah.
honest with you. I mean, even though there's probably no reason to be,
We've always
I
heard
just never did.
Yeah, if you did happen to get it in your blood system, is it true that if somebody was to do CPR on you for 10 or 15 minutes, you'd just get up and walk off?
Yeah, succinylcholine is a temporary neuromuscular blocking agent, and it will last for a minute or two, but soon it's quickly broken down internally. But it has to be intravascular. I can take a cup full and swallow it unless I have a break in the continuity of my mucosa, my lining of the intestinal tract. It won't hurt a thing in the world. It's got to be inside the blood vessels. Once it's inside the blood vessels, it'll paralyze the diaphragm, but it's quickly deactivated 1 to 2 minutes. When I use it in anesthesia, I paralyze the diaphragm to put an endotracheal tube in so I can breathe for them doing surgery. Then I have to use another agent rather than the nectine to put them to sleep during the surgical procedure. So a nectine is temporary.
Gotcha. Good stuff.
Yeah, we've learned a lot. We have certainly learned a lot. We're just hoping that we can inspire folks, but show them the right way to do things. And with tree stand safety is so important. That was a great story that you told. Guys need to wear these safety harnesses for sure.
From the ground up.
And then learning about, just making sure that I just realized there's a question I wanted to ask you.
All right.
But here we go. The details. Do you have a system for if you have one of these big quality whitetails that's walking and he's coming by your stand? Do you have some? Do you try to stop him before you take a shot, or what do you do? Because look, flashback 2 weeks, I had a big deer walking up on me, and I was scared to death to make a noise and stop him. I thought he would just explode if I went, and I didn't. And I took a shot at him walking, and I hit him a little far back. Looking back, I think, man, I should have stopped him.
Pros and cons. The pros for stopping is that you're not hitting a moving target, but if you stop them, the target is more apt to move. Okay, so what you need to do if you shoot at a moving target, you need to shoot at the scapula if they're walking. That way you're going to hit a little bit further back, and you got a much better chance of hitting the back. So you have to make a decision. Now, if a deer, let me say this, if a deer comes in and he's right under your stand, he's within 5 yards of your tree, okay? Where do you shoot? He's facing your tree. There's no way you can get a double lung shot. If you hit one lung and don't get a main pulmonary artery or pulmonary vein, he's going to bleed and clot, and he'll live on the remaining lung. So where do you shoot? The most lethal, highest recovery rate from a deer that's within 5 yards is you shoot at their spine just above their scrotal area with the buck, and same with the doe above the genitalia. If you hit the spine, they go down. You can shoot them easily a second time.
I think he said it depends.
Yeah. So if you had that buck at 30 yards and he's walking, would you have, what would you have done?
I would have stopped him. And that way his head would be up, and I'll have a better chance of not ducking the string, even if he's looking in my direction where he heard the grunt. He stopped.
It depends. I mean, what is he doing? Where's he going to? If he's not bothered, that deer wasn't bothered at all. If he's fixing to get a worse and worse shot, yeah, I'd stop him. But if he's not, and he's still coming, or he's still going to be in range, and you're not worried, wind's right, all that. Don't get in a big hurry. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
The one thing on the close shot, it's hard to remember stuff at the point of attack. Oh my gosh! But just remember on the really close shot, if you hold on the side of the deer like we talk about low and all, you're barely going to get anything. You got to hold on a 5 yard deer. You got to hold really high, to his point, really high.
Talking about lethality of a femoral shot, I had Chuck Adams, and I don't think he'd mind my saying this, as my guest at the Mississippi Bowhunter Association, our annual awards banquet, and I picked him up at the airport, and I had lunch with him, spent time with him. He was talking about stalking and lethal shots, and he said, in my tenure of bow hunting, I have killed 7 deer with hip shots. Says the first 2 were unintentional. The last 5 were intentional. He said, because I had a good animal, but I didn't have a clear window to his vitals, so I shot him in the hip. And he said none of the 7 deer went over 100 yards and had an excellent blood trail. And the reason being, he was cutting the femoral and the muscular branches of the femoral, which is just like shooting the carotid or the aorta.
Man, they go quick.
Yeah.
And that, through the years, that was the preferred site for people that shot a pod, was to shoot them in the hip.
Well, guys, I've enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I really have. I'm looking around. Richie, is there any business left undone we need to do?
No, we pretty much covered it.
Okay.
All right.
I think we're about to run out of tape over here. So, Dr. Bumgardner, thank you so much for
my
being here.
pleasure.
You're a treasure, and
That's
we
an
recognize
inspiration.
that.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
A life well lived. I mean, that's the only, we could all wish for that. Man, what an inspiration. Someone to look up to.
Yeah, yes. All right. Thank you, sir. Lanny, I'm looking at you. Why don't you say goodbye, Lanny?
Why don't you say goodbye, Bobby?
Goodbye.
Where is Dudley?
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.